as we're going through the Bible verse by verse, but there's also, we've parked on these first 4 verses of Hebrews, and there's just too much there. I don't want to hurry away from. You got the deity of Christ and creation and all this kind of stuff. So we'll be reading those first 4 verses again in Hebrews chapter 1. And writing, of course, to Jewish believers who are now suffering persecution from other Jews, some Gentiles. They're wondering, they're thinking about how much they've lost with Judaism. They've lost jobs, they've lost family, they've been disowned by family, and they used to have all this stuff that was part of their identification, part of their identity, and now it's just this invisible God. There isn't all these ceremonies, there's not the temple, there's not the priesthood, you got all this stuff going on. And so the author of Hebrews has to deal with this and say, look, he's going to say all through the book, Jesus is better than all that stuff. He's better than angels, better than Moses, better than the Old Covenant. And so that's the backdrop of this. And so today we're going to look at God's glory in these first 4 verses, man's glory, man's hatred of God's glory, and then how God dealt with that hatred of man's glory. So I don't always break it up into points and all that stuff, because I don't see the point in saying prayer, power, and, perfection or whatever, because it never does me any good, but I'm going to throw it out there for you. And here we go. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1, God, who in various times and in various ways was spoke in time past to the fathers by the prophets, has in these last days spoken to us by his Son, or in Son, as if Jesus was a language in and of himself. He spoke to us in Greek, German, he spoke to us in Jesus. Whom he has appointed heir of all things, through whom he made the world. So you have creation involved here. Who being the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person, and upholding all things by the word of his power, when he had by himself purged our sins, sat down at the right hand of God, right hand of majesty on high, have become so much better than the angels, as he has by inheritance obtained a more excellent name than they. And so you see this progression taking place. He purged our sins. We're told that we see the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. He purged our sins. He sat back down at that throne. He had left that throne. And now somehow, through the redemption of sinful mankind, his glory seems to be intensified, if that's even possible. And so that's the picture that's taking place. Now, the Jews would have somewhat of an understanding of the glory of God, but there's kind of a mist over it. They don't see, like you look at Isaiah, we'll go to Isaiah, and in chapter 6, we're going to look at this again, because it's so necessary for our teaching. Remember the year King Uzziah died, verse 1. I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above it stood 6 seraphim, each one had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. I used to see that when I got stoned all the time. This is real. And one cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And now, remember the universe is his temple, so it's a picture of the universe being shaken by the truth of God coming out. And we'll see that Jesus is the ultimate final word of God. And the posts of the door were shaken by the voice of him who cried out, and those who the house was filled with smoke. So he said, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I'm a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of the people of unclean lips, for I have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. And apparently he was going around Jerusalem, according to historical accounts, and he heard people blaspheming the Lord, and he heard them not trusting and obeying the Lord. And it says, Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a live coal, which he had taken with the tongs from the altar, and he touched my mouth with it and said, Behold, this has touched your lips, and your iniquity is taken away, and your sin purged. So what we have here is a vision of the glory of God, probably the strongest one in the Old Testament, but it's incomplete. It's incomplete. You have Isaiah here almost like a church mouse just scurrying over to the corner, just terrified of the holiness of God. He's being disintegrated. He's falling apart. He's being undone. undone is what's happening here in the story. But what happens is, I said last week, and I remember I used to pray at a golf course, and every morning the mist would be over, and the sun would come out and burn away the mist. And that's exactly what happens in Jesus Christ. We see that glory of God more fully in the face of Jesus Christ. And so we look at Revelation chapter 4, if you want to go there, and I'll just read a little bit from that in 5. And here the Apostle John is on the island of Patmos, and he's given the vision. After these things I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was like a trumpet speaking with me, saying, "Come up here, and I'll show you the things which must take place after this." Immediately I was in the Spirit. Behold, a throne set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. And he who sat on the throne was like jasper and sardius stone in appearance, and there was a rainbow around the throne in appearance like an emerald. So you see, now the vision of Isaiah is being vivified. Now it's high definition. Now there's this incredible variety of shining colors. Verse 4, and around the throne were 24 thrones, and on the thrones I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white robes, and they had crowns of gold on their head. We didn't see any of this in Isaiah. And verse 6, before